Hello? The story I will tell you today takes place in Mexico. About 80 kilometers west from Mexico City, there is a park-like urban area called Interlomas. At the center of the complex is a green area, while the surrounding parts are residential zones. The complex is not only luxurious and convenient, but also has a comprehensive security system. Therefore, despite the high house prices, it still attracts many wealthy people to settle here. Most residents believe that their place is certainly the safest residential area in the country. This belief had never been shaken until a mysterious event occurred. It was around 8 a.m. on March the 22nd, 2010, at a luxury apartment in Interlomas. The maid named Erica, as usual, was preparing breakfast for the whole family. After arranging the dishes in the kitchen, she went upstairs to wake up the two children for breakfast. After waking up, the older daughter, Erica, continued to the room of the younger daughter, Paulette. As usual, she approached the bed and pulled back the blanket, but this time she was shocked to discover that 4-year-old Paulette was missing. In the apartment, there were a total of 6 people. The husband, Mauricio Guevara, was a real estate businessman. With a good background in his own efforts, he had accumulated a vast fortune in Mexico. The wife, Lisette Farah, was an immigrant from Lebanon and a well-known lawyer. After getting married, they had 2 daughters. In the eyes of everyone, this was an enviable family. Besides the 4 family members, there were 2 maids, Erica and Martha, who had a very good relationship with the family. On the morning of March the 22nd, after discovering Paulette missing, the 2 maids began searching for the child in every room. They turned all the closets upside down, checked under the beds and other hidden corners of the house, but still could not find her. A sense of anxiety then spread throughout the house. Paulette was not an ordinary child. Born prematurely, her body was severely disabled, her limbs could not move normally, and she could not walk on her own. At that time, she was 4 years old, but could only speak simple words. Due to her congenital disability, she received special care from her parents, and most of the daily tasks of the 2 maids revolved around Paulette. The night before, it was the mother herself who had carried Paulette to bed and watched her fall asleep. So what could have caused a 4-year-old child who couldn't walk normally to disappear overnight? With this thought, the family immediately called the police. In some poor regions of Mexico, it is not too uncommon for children to go missing or die. However, this case happened in one of the country's top areas, and the victim's father was a businessman well known even to the governor. The case quickly caught the attention of the police, and Alberto Bazbaz, the General Director and Attorney General of Mexico, personally took charge. A large number of police officers quickly arrived at the scene. At the scene, Paulette's room was intact with no signs of damage or break-ins at the doors and windows. According to the descriptions from the parents and the maids, they all said they did not hear any suspicious movements from the child. That night, the complex had numerous surveillance systems set up around the area. The police checked all the surveillance cameras but found no trace of the child, nor did they detect any suspicious individuals. The police at that time were also puzzled because they did not know how it was possible to take a child out of the house without leaving any traces or making any noise. The case, which initially seemed simple, gradually became more complicated. That afternoon, the Mexican authorities officially issued a missing person notice while the police began gathering information from the surrounding residents. Paulette's parents used all their connections and resources to broadcast the information on television, radio, and social media, hoping someone might provide useful information. Due to the efforts from multiple sides, Paulette's case officially became the focus of public attention overnight. Missing person notices for her appeared on major traffic routes and bus stations in Mexico City. Paulette's mother also conducted a news report in her daughter's room, holding her daughter's clothes in front of the camera, stating that if the kidnapper agreed to return Paulette, the family would not press charges. Her only wish was to bring her daughter home. On that day, all the kind-hearted people of Mexico were worried about the child's safety. Subsequently, the local police deployed a large force to participate in investigating Paulette's case. The police conducted numerous surveys and investigations in the surrounding area, interrogating all related individuals in the vicinity. The police even searched all the rooms of Paulette's family multiple times but could not find any valuable clues. This case was entirely different from typical abduction cases, as the perpetrator did not contact the victim's family. As time passed without any new leads, the police couldn't even identify a suspicious suspect. Eventually, the police began to realize they might have been approaching the case incorrectly from the start. On March the 25th, the police secretly installed some listening devices in the apartment and started suspecting that the problem might not be external but within the family itself. Not long after, a conversation between the mother and the older daughter caught the police's attention. This conversation was recorded and immediately became a crucial piece of evidence. The case took a new turn on March 30th, 2010, when the police arrested Lisette, Mauricio, and the 2 maids. The police then placed them in separate rooms and started interrogating each person individually. However, the more information they gathered, the more they felt something was off. The 4 family members each suspected that the others had taken Paulette. The 2 maids pointed out that although the couple was very wealthy, they did not care about their children and often left them to the maids' care. On the day Paulette went missing, the maids searched everywhere but in a state of unease. However, the child's mother remained in her room smoking while the father Mauricio did not react much and did not behave like a parent who had lost a child. That night, Mauricio informed the police that his wife had lied to them about meeting a lover and returning home very late the night before their daughter went missing. The last person to have contact with Paulette was also Lisette. Mauricio suggested that Paulette's disappearance might be related to Lisette, prompting the police to start suspecting her. Lisette, who was most suspected, explained to the police that the conversation between her and her daughter was merely a lawyer's habit to avoid unnecessary trouble. On the night before her daughter went missing, she had put the child to bed and believed that if someone outside the family didn't take her, then someone inside the house was very suspicious. However, their testimonies were vague and lacked clear evidence, preventing the police from drawing immediate conclusions. From their professional experience, the police were increasingly convinced that someone in the apartment was definitely involved in the incident. At 2 a.m. on March the 31st, 2010, the police sent 3 forensic officers back to the apartment to search for more clues. When they entered the girl's room, some investigators unexpectedly smelled a foul odor similar to rotten eggs. They lifted the mattress on the bed and witnessed a horrifying sight. Paulette, wearing blue pajamas, was lying on her side between the mattress and the headboard, her body already decomposing and emitting a foul smell. A preliminary autopsy showed that the time of death was around March the 28th, 3 days before she was found. By comparing this time with the scene, the police quickly focused on the main suspect, the girl's mother. On April 4th, Attorney General Alberto held an emergency press conference to announce the police investigation results to the public. He declared, "We have determined that this incident is not a murder case. The victim's mother, Lisette, is the main suspect in the investigation." Psychologist Sandra Yadeum revealed that during her interactions, Lisette showed clear signs of emotional and even mental disorders. This increased suspicion that she might have killed her own daughter. A mother who initially seemed desperate in searching for her missing daughter was now becoming the perpetrator who killed her own child. The incident quickly spread throughout Mexico via social media, causing widespread outrage. No one could understand what kind of person Lisette was to let her daughter decompose under the bed without noticing. However, a more puzzling event occurred just weeks later as people debated and demanded severe punishment for the criminal. Finally, the police announced the final results of the investigation. Paulette's case was not a murder, but an accident. The latest forensic report showed that the time of death was between March 21st and March the 26th, when she went to sleep on the night of March the 21st. Paulette had accidentally rolled towards the headboard and fell into the 15 centimeters gap between the bed frame and the mattress. Due to her physical disabilities, she could not free herself and eventually died of suffocation due to her nose being blocked and her chest and abdomen being compressed. The bruises and fluids on Paulette's body matched the corresponding stains on the bed, and the blisters were due to natural decomposition. This indicated that her body had not been moved. According to Lisette and the 2 maids' testimonies, they used 2 pillows to keep Paulette from falling off the bed while she slept. The police speculated that using the pillows prevented her from moving sideways, forcing her to move toward the headboard and fall into the narrow gap. The police then brought several children of Paulette's age and weight to experiment. The results showed that they could indeed roll into that narrow gap. The final crucial point was when the police brought sniffer dogs to the scene. They took samples from the bed linen for the dogs to detect odors. Bodily fluids from the girl were found on the sheets, although not easily visible. This indicated that she might have been lying at the headboard from the first day she went missing. Strangely, during the 9 days Paulette was missing, hundreds of people visited the room to check, and the family and police checked the bed and headboard more than a dozen times. During that time, the 2 maids changed the sheets 3 times, and the mother's close friend Amanda slept on that bed for 3 nights. Despite cleaning the bed and journalists frequently coming near the bed, no one noticed any unusual signs at the headboard or any strange smells. This bizarre conclusion caused a wave of strong emotions in Mexico, from anger and astonishment to skepticism. In the powerful judicial system, Paulette's parents were highly respected. They had close connections with the mayor and regional governor. Although the authorities disclosed most information related to the case, the public could not accept this strange conclusion. People delved into the information released by the media and the police, uncovering terrifying aspects. In the news report, Paulette's mother was shown arranging her daughter's clothes. Notably, one of the outfits she held was identical to the one Paulette was wearing when she died. Although the mother explained that this was just a coincidence and that it was a common design for girls' clothing, many people believed that someone had hidden the girl and changed her clothes. In the middle of the night, after the entire family was arrested, the police sent 3 forensic experts to the scene. The timing and the search process created a feeling that it was all prearranged. Even when they discovered the body, they did not appear surprised. What was stranger was that when they lifted the mattress, a forensic expert vaguely stated that the girl had been severely beaten. Another forensic expert revealed that due to pressure, they had to alter the actual time of death, although details about this were not provided, and the police never responded to these suspicions. By April 2010, all 4 suspects were released without charges. Some parties called for a review of the case, suggesting that someone was deliberately distorting the truth. By May 2010, the case was closed, with the conclusion that it was merely an accident. Under public pressure, Attorney General Alberto held a press conference to announce that he had lost all faith and resigned. This became one of the most controversial cases in Mexican police history. Many people still could not accept the police's conclusion. After Paulette's burial, Mauricio and Lisette officially divorced, and Lisette left the apartment in Interlomas in March 2017. Paulette's body was exhumed for the family to hold a cremation ceremony, and local authorities stated that there was no more evidence to investigate the case further. To this day, the case continues to be debated, but most people believe the cause was either murder or manslaughter. It is possible that during the process of raising their disabled child, the couple had conflicts and unintentionally or intentionally harmed their daughter. Realizing that the situation could not be resolved, they may have devised a cover-up plan. This tragic story has drawn significant attention from the public, particularly regarding the couple's assets and real estate. They had the means to cover all medical expenses for their daughter, and most of the time, the child was cared for by 2 nannies to ease their burden. In this case, although there were many suspects, the motive for killing their daughter was unclear. Some people believe the police's conclusion as the most suspicious aspect was that despite many people searching, no one found the girl. This seemed odd because normally people would not think she was lying in the gap between the bed frame and the mattress, wrapped in several layers of blankets, which could have masked the smell and made detection difficult. The peculiar environment of the Mexican judicial system can make many people suspicious of whether there was any cover-up of the crime for the privileged class, complicating Paulette's case into a more complex issue. It might have been a simple coincidence, but if there is a secret behind the incident that no one knows, what would people think of this case? On December 25, 2003, in the town of Bivinchagan, Inner Mongolia, a man named San called the local police to report a very unusual and unbelievable incident. Due to his emotional state, his voice was shaky and unclear, prompting the police to ask for the location and rush to the scene to gather more information. Upon arrival, the police saw a group of people standing beside a half-dug grave with dirt and belongings scattered everywhere. There were fragments of bones strewn across the ground, along with a tattered set of clothing and a mud-covered green coat. The man had calmed down and began to recount the incident. He and his younger brother, both natives of the area, had come with a few relatives to move their father's grave next to their mother's. After completing the necessary rituals and offerings, the group started digging. However, as they dug, they came across a tattered set of clothes and discolored bone fragments scattered about, causing the San brothers to panic, thinking the grave had been robbed. According to certain burial customs in Inner Mongolia, valuable items are sometimes buried with the deceased, making a grave robbing an occasional occurrence. At the time, those present believed that grave robbers had stolen the valuable jewelry from the grave, then tossed the remains of the deceased onto the coffin lid, covered it carelessly with dirt, and left. Heartbroken and angry, they carefully set aside each bone fragment and continued digging to investigate further. They meticulously collected each fragment and tried to piece the skeleton back together. When they reached the coffin, they were shocked to find it still sealed, with the nails at the corners untouched. Upon opening the coffin, they saw the red burial shroud intact and their father's remains undisturbed inside. The San brothers exchanged bewildered looks, gradually realizing that this was not a case of grave robbery. Instead of anything being stolen, their family had somehow gained an additional set of remains. Angrily and fearfully, the man called the police. Investigating officers conducted an 8-hour search and examination, ultimately gathering many scattered bone fragments. After forensic analysis, they reconstructed the bones and determined that the deceased was a man between 25 and 35 years old, approximately 1.72 meters tall. The estimated time of death was between 5 and 7 years ago, roughly between 1997 and 1999. The disjointed bones did not separate due to decomposition, but showed clear signs of being cut, especially visible on the shin bones. To be precise, this was a case of murder involving the dismemberment of the body to dispose of it. The victim's bones showed signs of being cut, with two types of tools, one sharp and the other blunt. Forensic analysis indicated that these injuries were likely caused by an axe and a large chopping knife. At the scene, the police also found a white long-sleeve shirt, a navy blue coat, cream-colored trousers, leather shoes, and a leather belt with a missing metal buckle. Additionally, there were pieces of rotted rope and burn marks on the sleeve of the coat, measuring 4 centimeters and 5.5 centimeters. The victim's trousers also had a few smaller burn holes with a diameter of less than 1 centimeter. Based on the victim's height and the size of the clothes, it was determined that the clothes matched the victim's build and were likely his. The shirt and trousers were from a fairly expensive brand, suggesting that the victim paid a lot of attention to his appearance. The burn marks were likely inflicted during a struggle with the perpetrator in a place with a stove, indicating that the initial crime scene was probably in a private space, such as a house. Although the victim's clothes had burn marks, they were small and not the cause of death. The exact cause of death was not determined because after 7 years, the victim's soft tissues had decomposed and the body had been dismembered, making it difficult to identify injuries from the knife and axe on the bones. The provisional cause of death was undetermined, but it was likely not due to poisoning. The clothes found, despite being expensive, could be purchased at many stores in town. Moreover, the victim's shoes had very common local insoles, suggesting that the victim was likely from the area. The police were particularly interested in the victim's shoes, which were quite fashionable for the years 1998 to 1999. Although the insoles were locally sourced, the shoes themselves were not available for sale in Inner Mongolia. In the 1990s, social media was not as widespread as it is today, and there were no online shopping options, making it unlikely that someone living in Inner Mongolia would order shoes from elsewhere. The police leaned towards the theory that the victim could have been a young man working away from home who brought back some items, including the leather shoes, from another region. The clothing, consisting of a long-sleeved shirt, trousers, and an additional navy blue coat, indicated that the victim died during cold weather. Based on the clues gathered at the forensic scene, the police constructed a scenario in which the victim, a man aged around 25 to 35, was murdered during cold weather. The initial crime scene was indoors, as it was customary for local residents to light stoves for warmth in the winter. The conflict leading to the victim's death likely occurred near a stove, where he was pushed into it by the perpetrator, then killed and dismembered. The perpetrator used the victim's own clothes to wrap the body parts, tied them with pieces of rope, and transported them to the grave site for disposal. At this moment, Mr. San remembered an old incident. During the Qingming festival in 1998, when he and his brother visited their father's grave, they discovered a hole on the grave. They initially thought it was dug by animals and wanted to fill it back in. However, when they consulted a local shaman, he advised against it, saying that it would disturb the grave and should be left until the following year. When they returned the next year, the hole had grown larger. The two brothers then filled the hole themselves, considering it an unlucky omen, and never mentioned it again. Now, finding another person's skeleton in their father's grave convinced them that the hole had been dug by someone, not an animal. In 2003, this town had over 2,000 households with a total population of around 8,000 people. To identify the victim, the authorities launched an investigation into missing persons in the town from records between 1996 and 2000. They found more than 173 missing persons cases from 1997 to 1999, of which 7 remained unsolved. After comparing the gender, age, and timeline, only 2 cases had significant similarities. 2 men named Liang Bing and Wang Da. The first case the police investigated was Liang Bing, who went missing in November 1998. Locals remembered this time well because it was tied to a story of repaying kindness with enmity that villagers occasionally still recounted. The story began when Liang Bing's parents, who had moved to this area, died when he was just 15. Before his disappearance, Bing worked as a shepherd for a local farm. To avoid overspending, he only took a small portion of his monthly salary for expenses, leaving the rest with the farm owner to collect at the end of the year. However, in November of that year, he suddenly disappeared without collecting his 10,000 yuan salary. This led the police to suspect foul play, as 10,000 yuan was a substantial amount at that time. During their investigation, the police found Liang Bing's best friend, Li Zhengqi. They had been close since childhood, and Li had even helped Bing get the shepherd job at his uncle's farm. When the police approached Li, he said that he and Bing had a falling out a few years ago and had not been in contact since. He claimed he had no idea where Bing was. Through local residents, the police learned that Zhengqi Li and Liang Bing had a previously good relationship. Bing often had dinner at Li's house. However, there was a period when Zheng Li went away for work for several months, during which neighbors noticed Bing sneaking into Li's house at night. This led to rumors of an illicit affair between Bing and Li's wife. One neighbor, suspecting the relationship, called Li to inform him of the suspicious behavior between Bing and his wife. Li immediately took leave and rushed home. Upon his late-night arrival, as he entered his yard, he heard his wife and best friend laughing together inside the house. Enraged, Zheng Li kicked open the door and found his wife and Liang Bing embracing on the bed. He attacked Bing in a fit of jealousy. The commotion was so loud that neighbors gathered outside the gate watching. Having planned to catch them in the act, Li had locked the gate upon entering, leaving Bing no choice but to climb over the wall to escape. After that night, no one saw Liang Bing again, and only embellished stories about Zheng Li's painful betrayal remained. Since Liang Bing's parents had passed away, there were no other relatives in the area to inquire about his whereabouts, and no one had any information about him. The police reached out to other regional police departments, particularly in major cities, to assist in the search. They eventually found Liang Bing's temporary residence registration in Beijing and managed to contact him. Liang Bing explained that after the shameful incident, he didn't dare return to his hometown, nor did he dare to approach Zheng Li's uncle to claim his 10,000 yuan salary. With no remaining family in the area, he had left and worked elsewhere for the past 5 years. With Liang Bing located, the police excluded him from their list of suspects. The other person of interest was Wang Da, who disappeared suddenly in January 1999 at the age of 30. Originally from Batou, he had married and settled in the town. A team of police officers visited Wang Da's house, but neighbors informed them that he had returned to his hometown in Batou after divorcing his wife. That was the last known information about Wang Da. No one knew his current whereabouts. Further investigation revealed that Wang Da's relationship with his ex-wife had been strained. He often beat his wife and even threatened his father-in-law. This raised police suspicion about Wang Da's sudden disappearance, whether he had indeed returned to Batou or was murdered by his wife's family. The police promptly visited Wang Da's father-in-law, He Yunming. When the police mentioned Wang Da, Mr. Ming did not hide his disdain for his former son-in-law. He recounted how his daughter and Wang Da frequently quarreled, and on several occasions a drunken Wang Da had beaten her. After the divorce, Wang Da once broke into Mr. Ming's house in the middle of the night, causing trouble and assaulting both his parents-in-law, prompting Mr. Ming to call the police. This incident became a topic of gossip among neighbors, causing Mr. Ming considerable embarrassment and reluctance to discuss it further. The police then went to Batou to investigate Wang Da's background. They discovered that he had indeed returned to Batou, but had unfortunately died in a car accident a few months after his return. Clearly, Wang Da was not the unidentified skeleton placed in the grave. With both Liang Bing and Wang Da accounted for, the investigation was back at square one, with the victim's identity still unknown. At this point, a resident reported that the son of a neighbor had suddenly disappeared in 1998. The informant said the missing person was nearly 30 years old at the time and named Liu Yonghu. This man was a notorious thug who had sold his family home several times. When he ran out of money, he would beat his parents and had accumulated substantial debts. His disappearance was initially thought to be an escape from debt, and no one paid much attention. However, upon seeing the police notice, the informant realized that Liu Yonghu matched the description of the unidentified victim in age, height, and the time of the disappearance. The police went to Liu Yonghu's house to meet his father, Liu Yufu. When questioned about his son, Liu Yufu remained calm and warmly invited the officers inside. He explained that his youngest son, Liu Yonghu, was currently working in Shanxi and living with foster parents. However, when the police asked for specific details to verify this, he could not provide the exact location of his son's workplace or the contact information for either his son or the foster parents. Feeling that Liu Yufu was hiding something, the police continued their interrogation. Eventually, he revealed the entire story. He and his wife had 3 sons and were already struggling to make ends meet. In 1974, his wife became pregnant with their 4th child. Due to their dire financial situation, the family often went hungry. The couple decided with heavy hearts to give their youngest child to a childless family because they couldn't afford to raise 4 children. They asked around for a better-off family to adopt the baby, and soon a family acquaintance from Shanxi came to Inner Mongolia to take the child. Liu Yufu said that although he and his wife were heartbroken, they handed over their newborn son to strangers. Both parents consoled themselves with the thought that the child would have a better life with his new family. As the years went by, their financial situation improved, and they began to feel regret. They considered going to Shanxi to bring him back, but felt they couldn't face the adoptive parents who had raised him for over 10 years. This regret haunted them for many years. One day in late 1997, Liu Yufu saw a young man lingering in front of his house when he returned from work. He approached and asked who the young man was looking for. The young man said he was looking for Liu Yufu because he was his fourth son. For 20 years he had longed to see his son but had not dared to seek him out, and now the boy had returned to find his parents. Liu Yufu vowed to make up for the lost years and provide the best for his son. He and his wife were overjoyed that their family was finally complete. However, their happiness was short-lived. Within a few months, all their valuable possessions disappeared with this son due to his gambling debts. Despite the best efforts of Liu Yufu, his wife, and their 3 older sons to advise and reform him, Liu Yonghu remained unchanged. Many people came to their house demanding money and threatening the family, claiming Liu Yonghu owed them. The family had to pay off his debts multiple times. Once they discovered that Yonghu had stolen the savings meant for the couple's funeral expenses. In their culture, it was customary to prepare for one's funeral in advance, even in middle age. Each time Liu Yufu and his wife scolded or advised Liu Yonghu, he responded with resentment and blamed them for abandoning him over 20 years ago. This accusation, which had tormented Liu Yufu and his wife for years, always left them feeling guilty and determined to make amends. They told themselves that as long as Liu Yonghu didn't do anything too outrageous, they would turn a blind eye. However, his behavior continued to drag the family into financial hardship. Liu Yufu contacted his son's adoptive parents and learned that they had spoiled Liu Yonghu since childhood because he was their only child. When he grew up, this young man only knew how to squander money and became addicted to gambling. After several instances of his son stealing all the money and gradually selling household items to fuel his gambling addiction, the foster parents scolded Liu Yonghu, which led him to leave home in search of his birth parents. Hearing this from his son's foster parents, Liu Yufu sighed deeply, not knowing how to discipline such a wayward child. The story didn't stop there. In 1998, when the house was dilapidated, the couple borrowed money from the bank to repair it. Unfortunately, Hao knew about it and demanded that they hand over the entire amount to him to repay his debts. He even threatened to kill his parents to steal the money. However, despite everything, the couple refused to give him any money. That night, intoxicated, Liu Yonghu returned home in a frenzy. He grabbed his father's collar and held a knife to his throat, demanding that Fu hand over the money borrowed from the bank. Despite Hao's threats, Fu refused to give in. In the ensuing struggle, Liu Yonghu stumbled into the stove and suffered minor burns. His clothes had a few small burn marks. Enraged, Liu Yonghu grabbed a knife and attacked Fu, leaving a scar on his arm that remains to this day. Although Hu was younger and stronger, Fu, fueled by anger, quickly overpowered his son. In a fit of rage, he killed the son he had longed for over 20 years. This story left everyone in the interrogation room speechless. Neighbors in the area also recounted the mischievous behavior and history of repeated deaths of the useless and incompetent son. After DNA testing, the police confirmed that the bones found in the grave belonged to Liu Yufu. When people in Vivenchagan town learned about Fu's family situation, they launched a campaign to garner support and reduce Fu's sentence. After an investigation and trial in June 2004, the Inner Mongolia People's Court sentenced Liu Yufu to 10 years in prison, while his 3 remaining sons received suspended sentences ranging from 1 to 3 years. The perpetrator of the case was a father who had experienced the loss of a child twice in his life, once hoping to find him after 20 years and the second time losing him permanently. There is nothing more painful than having to kill one's own flesh and blood. The agony of longing for a child for over 20 years, only to return and face one disappointment after another, culminating in the act of killing one's own son. Though this young man was born into a poor family, he was welcomed and loved by another family as if he were their own. His birth parents were also willing to welcome him back. He could have had both families, but ultimately his actions were unacceptable to all, driven solely by the passion for gambling. Many in society think they can make money from gambling, lotteries, or betting, only to end up with massive debts, causing their parents untold suffering, sometimes turning them into thieves. When faced with adversity, they choose negative paths, even self-destructive ones, to end it all, regardless of how much suffering it causes those around them or how much advice they receive. Isn't today's case truly tragic? How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.